Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, and we're calling this meeting in order at 5:31 or 5:30 and a half. So, Catherine. Thank you.
This one, Bruce Ketchum, looks like he wants to speak about the housing, the HR.
Can we please have roll call, Catherine?
Yes, ma'am.
Trustee Baker? Here. Trustee Rios?
Here.
Trustee Iverson? Here. Trustee Leon?
Here.
Trustee Goff?
Here.
Trustee Dodd?
Here.
Trustee Baldini?
Here.
And Trustee Segura?
Here.
Thank you.
We will do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pablo, can you please do the honor?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we're adopting the agenda.
So move.
Moved by Trustee Baldini, second by Trustee Iverson. All in favor?
Aye.
And so it is. So we're good with the agenda, no changes. And so we're adopted by consensus. And now, public comment. Public comment opportunity is governed by the State of California Brown Act. By definition, this is an opportunity to listen to concerns, perspectives, and different vantage points. The board is not able, under the Brown Act, to engage in any conversation or discussion, but we look forward to the opportunity to listen to community input. At this time, the board will devote a total of up to 15 minutes for comments to the Board of Trustees regarding subjects not appearing on the agenda for this meeting, but over which the board has jurisdiction. The public may ask the board to place an item related to the business of the district on future agenda, but no action discussion will occur at this time on such items. Individuals will be limited to 5-minute presentation. At this time, we will poll those in attendance regarding the intent to speak on any item not on the agenda. Do we have anybody? Okay, so we go to our action items. Human resources document. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move. Okay.
So you'd like to speak before we
I
discuss
gave a
it?
card to speak if I can. I'm Bruce Ketchum, trustee emeritus. I was going to wear my badge, but the back has come off, so I'm going to submit it to see if I can get a new backing on it. But I rise in this one because I've read over this document, which I always find interesting. And I wanted to make a request to you that I wish I had done when I was on the board. And I'm going to refer to the fact that I was noticing the salary, the payments to the Board of Trustees members that were listed at $240 a month. I submit to you, I don't think some of you are even getting minimum wage. And I happen to find that should be corrected. There happens to be an educational code section. It's 72024, 72024. Subsection 4 of that gives you the monthly amount. But subsection, that's A4, subsection E provides what I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm going to ask this be on the next agenda. On an annual basis, the governing board may increase the compensation of the board members beyond the limits in this section by an amount of 5% annually. My belief is, Mr. Baldini and I started on the board at $50 a month. The legislature saw fit to raise that to to $240 a month for this size board. And my belief is they also gave this provision, and that's to recognize that there is a thing called inflation. I look back at the time that this board took a 7% reduction one year to try to show solidarity and recognize that there was a shortfall. And then when the staff and the faculty were given a 7% increase, we didn't increase it for several years. And I found that nobody paid any attention to it, except I don't think it should be a hardship for those who have that financial situation. And I would specifically reference that Pablo, our student trustee, should be receiving that as well. So I'm going to ask that you exercise that provision for a 5% increase. I realize it's a whopping $12 a month, but I think Pablo can use it, and I think it's appropriate so that this is not a service in the board that's not compensated at least at the minimum wage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ketron. Point very well taken. And that's a great idea. Pardon? Retroactivity is a question here, no? No. But, thanks again.
I will second Trustee Baldini's motion to approve.
Do we have any comments, discussion?
Yes, I have a question. Actually, the action items 4.1, within the document 4.1, there's a title under, it says extra help. And within that are the trustees are listed. I was just wondering if someone could define extra help in that.
I can only define it as that is the label that has always been used.
Well,
And so I will work with my staff to find a better appropriate label, because obviously you all are not just extra. Well, you are extra, but not just extra help.
I'm here for you.
I know for the
Thank you.
county, it usually means like part-time permanent or something like that. Yeah. I don't know.
Thank you.
Any more discussion, any more questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppositions? We pass unanimously. Motion carries unanimously. And next on the agenda, we're going to get our study session underway, and this is in reference to student housing. We have Mr. Siri, Stephen Siri, of the Martin Group, who will introduce other team members. But I just want to, trustees, please, I recommend that presentation is very important. Please ask questions as you may. And so here we go.
Absolutely, and thank you for having us here tonight. I'm joined by HPI Architects, our team here, so I'll let them introduce themselves as they come up to speak. And as we go through this evening, again, we want this to be really more of a conversational setting. So there's a lot of different details. So as you have questions or go through it, please feel free to stop me and ask anything. So as we have on the agenda this evening, we'll be covering the physical due diligence summary. We'll be addressing demand for the project in relation to a Scion report. We'll be reviewing two different options. There's an option 1 and an option 2. Option 1 and 2 have different densities, but similar site plans, so the architects will go through that. We have an estimated rent comparison. These are all very preliminary early numbers, but relative to some of the cost feedback we've received to date, we'll be going through that. And then we'll discuss next steps. One of the goals of the meeting is to review both plan options. Again, they have similar floor plans, similar site plans, and as we come back to the next meeting next Thursday, the board would state their opinion and/or move to choose one of the plan options if we would move into phase 2. So the goal of Selecting one of those options is to solidify some design intent, which would then be used to advance the drawings in Phase 2. So as part of our physical due diligence, we hired 2 third-party engineers, 1 geotechnical engineer and 1 environmental engineer, to study both sites that you can see on the map here. So just to orient you, on the top of the screen here is the South Napa Marketplace, Imola Drive, Highway 121, and then the State Hospital here to the east. The two plan options that you will see, the larger northern site is for the apartment buildings, and then the southern site is the dorm site. Over the course of the diligence, the geotechnical report and environmental report consist of just a very basic kind of site visit by both engineers and a detailed review of the history of both sites. Nothing came up as a surprise in the geotechnical study. Moving into Phase 2, we will need to do some very basic kind of preliminary testing, which will tell us the composition of the soil and help determine what type of foundational plan we may need. The Phase 1 environmental plan brought to our attention that there is a former landfill, as you can see here in yellow. This is something that the college is aware of, and so is Napa County. Just a bit of history. Napa Valley College, prior to its ownership, as many of you may know, was Greenlands Farmlands, and it was owned by the state hospital, and it appears from records that there was a former incinerator on the site, shown back over here, and a subsequent landfill right here. We don't know the contents of the landfill. All of that would have to be discovered in Phase 2. It's currently a closed cap, so it's a landfill that has soil capped over it, and it's just quarterly monitored by Napa County. We have purposely designed the apartment site to have the apartments on the eastern side over here, and then the parking lots are over here. One of the potential solutions is just to further the cap, so you would essentially put the parking lot on top of it, or more dirt on top of it. Again, it's something that will have to be further addressed in Phase 2. We just don't have enough information at this time. Any questions on this piece?
I have a question about that. I'm just wondering, what is Napa County monitoring for? I mean, you said we don't know what's in there, so what are they monitoring?
Yeah, it's a good question. Typically, it would be methane gas, but it was technically, my understanding, an undocumented landfill that was discovered later on. So they have a standard protocol of essentially just coming out to the site and making sure that nobody is inhabiting the space, and security protections are in place. You have a razor wire type of fence there. So that's the extent of what I know.
So do we, at this point, know whether just capping it and putting the parking lot over, whether that's an actual viable option, or is it possible that there might have to be some remediation?
I think both could be options. We just don't really know until we would know what are the contents there. With it being an incinerator, my understanding is it's less likely that it would be producing some form of methane gas if it's ash that was dumped in there. But again, it's hard to speculate because you never know until you do any testing. So,
thank you.
Do they also monitor any leaching into the water features at that location, the county?
I'm not aware of that. I do know that the county comes out and meets with your facilities team quarterly for the inspection, so they might have more information on that. The next slide here is a demand analysis comparison of both options. And I'd like to just summarize a few things here. So both options have a dorm building, and both options have apartment buildings. The Scion report in July of 2019 comprised demand for single students and family students. Family students being defined as having a spouse, partner, or a dependents. Both plans have the dorm building, and the current plan would be that those would be inhabited only by single students. Both plans have apartments, and the current assumption is that those apartment buildings would be inhabited by families and students. A clear distinction between just leasing to single students and families. Single students would be leased to on a per bed basis. So you could have multiple occupants in one unit, but they're paying a lower price because they're just paying for their bed. Versus families would be leased like a traditional apartment on a per unit basis. The benefit of having the apartment building and having single students living in that and families is it would give future flexibility to the college in terms of if you have more families that may want to live here and less single students, you could easily push those up and down relative to your dorm building, which most families may not want to live in because those floor plans are a single dwelling room with a common kitchen and bath down the hall. So just something to highlight. Of the demand figures as they were presented, there were varying capture rates, 50% being the most conservative and then 70% being the most aggressive, and this is our understanding of the report. So 169 units for families up to 237 units. Under the current two options, plan option 1, there would be 142 family units, and then plan option 2, which is of lesser density, 92 units. And again, this would be something that's subject to further input from Napa Valley College in terms of how you may want to lay that out. The single student demand by the bed, the capture rates ranging from 315 to 441 beds. Plan option 1 has 383 beds currently. Plan option 2 has 321 beds currently. So in summary, the family student option currently has, under both plans, under the 50% capture rate, which would be more conservative in our understanding. And then plan option 1 and 2 for single students are in the range of 50 to 60% capture rates.
I understand the single student demand by bed.
Mm-hmm.
That tells us how many students could possibly live in the dorms. But the demand by unit,
Mm-hmm.
I'm confused because that really doesn't tell us whether these are one-bedroom units, two-bedroom units, three-bedroom units. Do we get to that where you're actually showing us some base numbers as far as?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is unit mix then. So how many studios, one bedrooms, two bedrooms?
So when we talk about family students, how many people are we actually talking about living there or potentially living in those apartments?
Yeah, we can certainly dive into that. And again, it's part of that is a function of how you want to program the units. So, there's plan option 1 has studios, one bedrooms, two bedrooms, and three bedrooms.
We'll find that out in the plan options.
Yeah, correct. And again, we have an initial first pass on that, but it's really your decision in terms of how you may want to lay that out. With that, I will turn it over to Jeff here. He's going to summarize what we heard and then go through some plans.
Good evening. Jeff McKieran, HPI Architecture. Good to see you all again. So we were here a couple months ago and presented some preliminary plans to you. At the time, we had even shown you some massing studies. Didn't really show a whole lot of detail in terms of the elevations, but again, it gave you a sense of how the buildings would sit on the site. Overall, we heard a lot of positive feedback from you guys and really appreciative of that. It allows us to continue to develop the project further. There were a few comments that I wanted to kind of touch on that we heard at the last meeting and kind of address to you how we've tackled some of those comments. So the first one, it says here switch buildings 3 and 4. In the plan, we had an isolated building, which was building 4, and at the time, we were showing studios in that building. Now, the intent was that building could potentially be more family-oriented, and some of the comments and feedback that we heard from you guys was that, well, if those were family units, then studios probably aren't the best unit type to put there. So what we had done was we switched that building with the other one, and that family building now is more 2-bedroom units as opposed to studios. And those studios were relocated towards the more active sort of courtyard area, okay? So that was one of the things, and we'll show you that in the plan when we pull that up. The other comment we heard was in terms of amenity spaces, again, that same building that I was just describing, that isolated building on number 4, the family building. At the time in the plan, we didn't really have any common spaces in there, any amenity spaces. So again, we'll show you in the plans. What we've done is we've added its own laundry facilities. We've added quiet study rooms and things like that. So we'll walk you guys through that as well. We also heard about the desire to minimize impact on traffic. Again, we're going to present to you 2 site plans, and you're going to see in those site plans how we've basically minimized the parking to the code requirement. We'll kind of show you that as well. There was discussion on, at the time we also kind of, in that massing model that we had showed you, that 3D massing, we were showing sort of glass at the ends of the buildings where you drive into campus and you kind of see these glass sort of common areas on there. There was a little bit of concern about security at the ends of those. So again, while we still maintain that architectural feature, we'll show you in the elevations how we've kind of mitigated that security concern. Number 5 here, explore pedestrian connection feasibility from the apartment side to Imola and South Napa Marketplace. Again, this was, we talked about this a little bit in depth last time in terms of how pedestrian students might cross the highway, and in a safe manner. So again, that's something that we're probably going to have to develop or study further in the next phase of things. But we did hear that, and that's something that we will continue to look into. So the plans that you're going to see today don't show a connection to that marketplace. And then again, just as Stephen had mentioned, 2 plans for the board to select. We're going to show you those 2 options here, okay? Let's see. So moving right into it, this is Larry Frapwell, president of HPI.
Good evening. So Jeff asked me to tag team this with him, so I'm happy to do that. I think this plan is primarily consistent with what you have seen previously. So what you see to the the south side of the entry drive is the traditional or dorm-style building, which is a three-story building. In both options, that building remains the same. On the north side of the entry, then, you're seeing this is option 1, if you will, which has 4 buildings. And I think the only real change, which I don't think you can see in this plan, was the switch in units that Jeff talked about between building 3 and 4. So building 4 became more apartments, building 3 became more studios, okay? The goal in the planning, when we started the planning on this, was enhancing the student experience. And how do you make connection between these sites and the core campus, and how do you create places that really support students, and the planning of the site works with the buildings and so forth. So a lot of attention was given to that. If you look at the dorm building, so the intent here is that the students would move to the north, they would transition across that entry drive. And so that would be a tabletop connection that brings you to the current connection that leads you up into the Cora campus and past the Performing Arts Center. You can point, Jeff, as we're going along here. On the apartment side, and so there would be a single point of entry kind of at the knuckle where no, Jeff, on the dorm building?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Single point of entry on the dorm building that provides security into that space, and then there would be dedicated outdoor space, exterior space for student use on the south side of that building that would be protected or separated from the balance of campus. Yes.
May I interrupt you for a second, please? Can you get just a little bit closer to the mic?
You bet.
Thank you.
Is that better? Okay.
Yes, so much better.
All right. Then on the north side, we have the 4 buildings, and the intent is to provide a primary point of entry off of the southwest corner that would link back to the just above the west end of where the current service arm comes across the road, and again tie you back into the pedestrian link that leads you into the Cora campus. And those buildings are organized again where there's primarily a single point of entry into the apartment buildings, that site area would be secured, that the site is planned in such a way that you could have a variety of scale of spaces. So you could have small private spaces, you could have very active spaces, you could have more passive spaces for reading and those kinds of things. And I think you'll see that a little bit further when we move into to some visualizations of the buildings. The goal here was also to, as Stephen said, to mitigate the impact of the planning on those environmentally sensitive areas. So we tried to stay out of the riparian area on the south side of the dorm building. We've tried to stay out of the landfill area to the extent possible, with the exception of parking. And we've tried to plan the buildings in such a way that they mitigate the impact on vegetation and so forth in the area.
Yeah. I'd also like to add, what you're seeing here in terms of parking, we're actually showing basically the code required minimum for parking so that we can minimize that impact on traffic as well. So we're providing, I think, approximately 67 spaces on the dorm side, and I think we're at about 380 right now on the apartment side right here.
We also oriented that parking so that if, to the extent you would like to, we can maximize the solar exposure and use of solar panels on the parking area. So this is the second option. So what you see here is the elimination of Building 4. So in this case, what we would be doing is minimizing the number of studio units. And Jeff, I think you're going to go through the mix of that. We've also then reduced the parking correspondingly. So the parking in all cases was based on the city's standard for parking, and so we're providing 1 stall per unit, basically. Per room, excuse me, on the parking. The dorm building remained the same in this case. The opportunities for open space within the apartment building and how you plan that space and program that space to support student use, I think remains the same. But what it does do is it reduces the site area by about 1.5 acres that are being impacted. It pulls Building 1 closer to the entry. So in both cases, we're really significantly changing the experience of entering the campus. And in option 1, that the apartment building that Jeff will talk a little bit about, the lantern effect at the ends of them, is further west, whereas in option 2, we're pulling it closer to the entry, and it flanks the entry a little stronger, I think.
Any questions on the site planning before we move to the building plans?
Yes, on option 1, are the automobiles on 221? Looks like
I think we have some dimensions as we move into this.
Yeah, we do.
Another
We
plan?
do, in fact. Oh, it's not on that one. It's actually probably closer to about 40 to 50 feet right there between buildings 3 and 4.
Could you repeat what you said for what the parking requirement was? It was per what? Per room?
One per sleeping room is the city standard. So basically, a 2-bedroom apartment would have 2 parking spaces required. A 1-bedroom has 1, and a studio has 1.
If you have two beds in one room or 4 beds in one room?
It doesn't change the requirement.
Change the requirement, right. So basically, you're, depending on the occupancy of those, the stalls per student might vary. To give you a sense of it, at Orange Coast College, I think we're parked at about 0.5 per student. At Santa Rosa, it is significantly less than that as it's currently planned, about 0.3.
And in fact, at Santa Rosa, there's been discussions of trying to provide incentive to the students to actually not bring the car to school as well. So they are also trying to minimize impacts on traffic as well. Okay?
I have a question about the circulation, and one of the concerns was the traffic and potential backup at the entry. And I can't tell from, this scale of plan whether there's one lane coming in and, the potential backup that might be created if you're turning left into the dorm area. I don't know if that's 1 lane or 2 lanes. Was that addressed?
Right in here, in this area. So I believe there's 2 lanes going into the site, and then one of those could be a left-hand turn lane as you go into the dorm building. An alternative could be if there's a concern about backing up as you enter the site, an alternative could be that you don't put a left-hand turn lane there, and you make the students go around the traffic circle and then come into it.
Right.
So
you could mitigate the entrance there.
Yeah.
One other quick question. The little dotted red that goes across the parking from the dorm to the little, right there, is that a bridge or
No,
what is that?
Currently, at least, that's intended to be a tabletop, so a large raised, slightly raised crosswalk. There are multiple alternatives on how you use warning lights and other kinds of traffic mitigation or traffic slowing, but the intent currently, and that's all related to cost, I think, and then ultimately affordability, is that's shown as at a grade level crossing.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Which is also why on the apartment building, we tried to move that west of that traffic arm
At the crossroads.
yeah.
He's referring to how students would leave the apartment site and cross over to connect in to the existing walkway.
I'm just wondering, you can set it up that way, but it doesn't mean students are going to actually use it.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking at this saying, okay, if I lived there, would I actually go around or would I run across the roundabout, right, and take the shortcut? So I'm just wondering if that's a realistic plan. I mean, it may be the only plan we've got, but I just look at this and think, would I really take the long
So
way?
that's a
Not
good
sure.
question. I don't know today, where you access that path or trail that comes into the core of campus and how convenient it is to cross through that riparian area to get there. So if you want to encourage it, there's various ways to create barriers and make it less convenient. But you're right, students will take the most convenient path.
Right. I mean, one thing to consider is, we're providing landscape buffers along the edges of the sites here. You could put some nice, sharp, pointy bushes in there, and that might help deter them. But you're right; they're gonna choose the easiest path of travel. So, yes.
Go back to option 1, please. again, a question on building 3 and building 4. Their alignment, they seem to be flipped in this schematic as far as the floor plans, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So that would avoid, given the distance, 40 feet, looking directly into your opposite unit
Correct.
and whatever they're doing.
Right. Yeah, windows don't
Don't
really
necessarily
align across. Right.
Because your buildings are flipped in that.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the site plan? Okay. So what I'll do now is I'm going to walk you through options 1 and 2 floor plans. Starting with option 1. Again, we presented this at the last board meeting. Not a lot has changed. Like I mentioned earlier, the big change was that we changed the units in the buildings 3 and building 4. So everything that's sort of this green colored area, those are all studio apartments. We originally had them in building 4. So what we did is we moved those over here towards the more active courtyard, and we moved all the 2-bedroom units over here to sort of the quieter area. So that was the big change on the plan. A few other things. The other thing that I mentioned was the common space or the amenity spaces on building 4. We did not originally have provided a lot of, actually, I don't think any amenity spaces for that building. So now what we've done is we've provided study rooms on all 4 floors, and we've also provided laundry services and things like that. So overall, in the plan, the idea is to try to distribute those amenities or common areas, the study rooms and laundry rooms, equally throughout all 4 buildings in terms of distance traveled. So you're not having to travel really far to find those, and each building has its own study space that they can utilize. The majority of the common areas does happen in building 1, though. As Larry mentioned, this is the main lobby for building 1. So you would come into some doors right here. This is a 2-story lobby right here that we're planning. Inside that lobby, there would be a security checkpoint, so a security person could see everybody coming and going. You would travel through that lobby, and you can come out through into the courtyard if you'd like. Inside that lobby, we also have a bank of 2 elevators in there, so you could come up through that, and you can travel to your different buildings. These 3 buildings, again, are connected by bridges on the upper floors. We have distributed the elevators and stairs per the code so that the distance travels meets those requirements. We've also done, so on this ground floor, what we also have here is we've included a mail room. So there's an area for mail to be delivered, parcels, things like that, and an office there. We've also provided a quiet study room in this area here. Otherwise, the rest of this is intended to be sort of an open lounge space for students to kind of hang out and meet their friends as they come and go. On the upper floors in this same space, what we've done is we've included other amenities for the residents, such as more study rooms. We're looking at game rooms up there. Yeah, things like that. So in this knuckle, they're all common areas as you go up the floor. At some of these other areas where you're seeing purple, like for example, in this area here, in this knuckle, that's one of the laundry room spaces. So there's laundry rooms on all 4 floors that we're showing right now. Again, that may change as we develop establish the overall bed count. We're trying to provide as much laundry services as we can for the maximum number of beds that are provided in the building. So that's one location. And then the other one we located over here. So it's very close for all 3 of these buildings to come in, residents of all these buildings to come in and get to their laundry. Like I said, this one has its own laundry service. And then again, when we show you the renderings of the buildings, you're going to notice the ends of these. What we tried to do was create some common areas on the ends of this building. So as you enter into the site, the first thing you see is that common area, not just a blank wall where a unit might be. So it really adds a nice front door appeal to the campus, and we'll show you that. Yes, sir. It is. That's a fire access road. Yeah, that's correct. Correct. Let me go back to the plan real quick here. So that is correct. So we did provide a ring road all the way around. While a majority of the parking stalls are up here, there was opportunity to get some additional stalls over here. I guess keep in mind that the main entry still is over here. So the most convenient parking would probably be up in this lot, but there is opportunity that we kind of wanted to make sure we were meeting that mark of the city standard. So we provided additional parking down there. Mhm. Now, option two, again, exact same design. So it really is, it's just the elimination of that studio building on the end. Otherwise, it's the same. The dorm building, this is the same design for both options. And as Larry mentioned earlier, the main entry is at the center of the building. So this is that crosswalk that we were just talking about, the tabletop here. So students would come from the campus, and they would walk along this walkway. They would cross across here. They would come up, and there's a walkway along the building that leads you right into the center of the building here. And again, we're looking at that being sort of a two-story lobby. Again, you'd have a security checkpoint there so they could see everybody coming and going. Even the stairs at the ends of the buildings that you see, those aren't intended to be entrances, and they could be alarmed so that you're not having people coming in from those areas. The intent is that everybody comes in and out of one point. And that security checkpoint also allows visibility towards the exterior sort of patio area back here so they can see people coming and going to their rooms, inside, outside, everything. In this common area, we've also included the same amenities such as mail rooms, an office. On the upper floors, we have a large common kitchen and dining area. We have a game room as well. And again, what we're doing is providing study areas on all floors here. So we have study rooms on the corner here, study rooms over here, and these are quiet and closed study rooms, and even there's some study area in the central area here. The remainder of that space is, again, just intended to be open, sort of active lounge areas for students to hang out in. The overall design of this, again, just to kind of walk you through, the units on the right here, those are all studio or sort of dorm, and they can be single or double occupied, so it's a single space. And then what we have is we've clustered all the restrooms into a common restroom area right in the middle here. And those have showers and toilets in them, and they can be programmed how you see fit in terms of how they're occupied, whether they're male or female. So there's some flexibility there. The other side of the building, these are all what we're calling the semi-suites. So what it is there's two rooms that share a common restroom that has a toilet and a bathroom in it. So they don't have common restrooms like this one, but they're a little bit more private over there. Okay. Oh.
What is this right here that's like a fence wall?
Right, so, yeah, as you go through this site, there's quite a bit of slope that comes down. So it drops down over here, down to where there's a stream in this area. And so what we've done is to try to maintain a nice flat entry, the floor here. We've put a retaining wall around here so that we can stay out of this sort of green area. And so what you're seeing is a retaining wall that comes around here, and then it comes down and forms the edge of this parking lot. Yes.
Both option 1 and 2, did not see the bus stop.
Oh, you know what? In fact, that was something I meant to mention in our recap of the last meeting. We did talk about that at the last meeting, and my understanding was that it was not a historical building, and it didn't sound like it was very much favored. So right now, we are not showing it there. If you do want to keep it, it doesn't really change the plan at all. So it's up to you guys whether you want it there or not. So we're not showing it now, and you won't see it in the renderings, but that's up to you guys. So, and that's on the opposite corner, right up here. Yeah. What you will notice is that you guys right now have a monument sign on the corner. With this design, in order to get, again, our fire access through this and turned around, we would have to probably create a new monument sign on this corner because it lands kind of right in the middle of where that access road would be.
Which could be then flanked also on that north side.
Sure. Yeah, if you don't have that bus stop, you could have two monument signs, so it really has a nice entry statement.
Might be a question for staff. In any of your previous projects, has in this case, Napa Valley College retained the naming rights on any of these buildings?
You want to take that one?
Not to date, no. Although there has been some consideration on, I think, on the Santa Rosa project because of its exposure to the freeway about whether those opportunities are there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the layout of the buildings?
Speaking of buses, I mean, we were talking about the Vine bus and where that would, in terms of picking up students, if we're talking about, there's probably that much interest in having a public transportation stop. Has there been any discussions with MBTA?
No,
Or with staff
not
in terms
yet.
of where we might locate that? And just wondering about issues too, when you're talking about ingress and egress from the driveway as well, just to making sure that if it's on that front entryway in terms of pickup, I think Trustee Goff mentioned, you know, how, or maybe queuing up, you won't, being concerned about cars queued up in that driveway. So. Where would, in terms of,
Yeah,
where would be a good location?
we're going to
Just-
have to study that
Yeah.
distance
Don't
and
need
the
to tell me now,
stacking and
but yeah.
queuing as we get in further into traffic and look at, you know, how do we mitigate that? Are we going to need to bring them down and around or not? So,
Yeah, one other thing that just came to mind that we didn't mention in the site plan, what we've done in other projects and we are doing here is that, you know, right now the ride sharing is really popular. So what we do is we try to provide and designated areas for pickup areas too, so. Right. And we've done that both on the dorm building here and then at the front of the apartment building.
Great idea.
and I also don't know whether you have utilized zip cars at all on campus or not, but that's also becoming more and more prevalent and would, again, mitigate the traffic uses.
Okay. Again, these are the exact same units that we showed at the last board meeting. Absolutely nothing changed on these, but just again, to recap, you're seeing the studio on the top above the line here. These are all the apartment units. These are the studios, and they can be either single occupied or double occupied. They have a small kitchenette and a private restroom, some closet space. Over here, this is the one bedroom, same thing. It could be a single occupied unit or it could be a double occupied unit. It has one restroom with their shower, bathtub, and their sink, and it has space for a kitchenette and a living room on this one, and a dining area. The other one is a two-bedroom unit. Again, this could be double occupied, it could be single occupied, it could be a mixture of both. It has a living space in the middle, space for dining, two bathrooms, a kitchenette. And then finally, there's only a handful of these three bedrooms, but again, you have the living area and the three bedrooms on there, and you can determine how you want to occupy those. So, the dorms are these two units down here, which I mentioned earlier. The traditional sort of dorm can be single or double occupied. It does not have restrooms. It has a common restroom down the hall. And then this is the semi-suite that I mentioned, and it does have two rooms or two living units that could be, again, single or double occupied, and they would share a common restroom in the middle. But none of that has changed from the last meeting, so just kind of wanted to recap on that. So now what I'd like to do is kind of move into the architecture. So you haven't seen any of the new design yet on this. Last time, as I mentioned, we just showed a 3D massing to show the size of the buildings on the site. When we started looking at this, we really wanted to address some of the buildings that you have on campus now. What I'm showing on the screen here are three of your more current projects: the Performing Arts Building, the Gymnasium, and the Library. Again, they're a little bit more contemporary in nature, so that's where some of the design inspiration came from, you know, when you see the elevations of the new student housing. I did want to talk about the color palette a little bit. What I'm showing down here on the bottom right is the color palette that we're seeing happening on the campus. This sort of, starting from the left, this sort of orangish color, that's the accent color that you're seeing on the Performing Arts Building here. The next sort of softer yellow color is what you see on the Library Building. And then you sort of start to get a little bit of a darker burnt orange or reddish color, and that's the accent panels that you start to see on the Gymnasium. What we're proposing for the student housing one is something that's complementary to those three colors. So you're starting to create this palette here, and that's sort of like this burgundy color that you see around campus. I noticed it in some of your signage. It's in your logo on the grapes. So it's really starting to tie all these pieces together. So yeah, that's what you're going to start to see in the next renderings here. You'll also notice a few other architectural elements. We've pulled similar things like canopies over the entrances, large glass walls into the lobbies. Those are things that we've tried to tie into the new design as well of the student housing. Okay. So here's the first shot. This is an aerial shot from the highway. Looking down, this is your main entry drive as you come in. Again, on the left, you have your dorm building. On the right, you have your apartments there. As this starts to put the project in context, so you can really see, you know, the performing arts building is back here on the left side of the page. And then again, there's that stream area down here. So this really is just to put it in context to show you how it's starting to look on the site and fit in with the other things you have here. What I wanted to do is kind of show you, and this is a little bit dark on the screen, hopefully you can see it on your monitors a little bit better, but this is actually a shot that we rendered sort of in the evening or dusk times, and really what we wanted to show is what that experience might be as you enter into the site. Like we mentioned, we have the sort of common areas at the ends of the building, so what you're seeing glowing at the ends, that's that glass area. I did mention that there was some concerns over security that we talked about at the last meeting. So what we've done is we've raised the heights of the sills of those windows so it doesn't come all the way to the ground. We've also included louvers, and what that does is it provides an additional layer of security so people can't get into that glass or break through that. And it also helps mitigate some of the solar or the sun exposure into those areas. So it's really a nice feature that we thought that it starts to become a front door to your campus. It's a new experience as people come in. I think instead of, you know, maybe seeing the performing arts building, this might be your new first impression to that. So we wanted to be very aware of how that would look there. I mentioned also that we would probably have to look at other monument signs. Right now, we're just showing one monument sign on the left by the dorms, but you could potentially flank it on the other side and put two monument signs so you see it from both sides of the highway as you're going there. And again, yeah, I think the idea here is really just that these buildings can complement each other. There's a nice glowing effect or a lantern effect, so you drive through, and it's just a really nice experience as you enter into the campus there. Now this shot shows the main lobby of the apartment side. Again, it's a little dark on the screen. Hopefully you see it on your monitors better, but what you're looking at here is the main lobby of the apartments. On the ground floor there's a little awning over that or a little canopy for weather protection, but you would enter into that lobby. It's glass there. It's a 2-story lobby. What we've explored here in this design is on the 3rd floor, we've kind of peeled back the building a little bit, and what that does is allow you to have potentially some outdoor space up there. It could be a little balcony or patio up there. And again, in terms of materials, those where those main entry points are and those sort of special features, we're using that sort of burgundy color, that wine color, for the accents. You're also we're trying to warm it up a little bit with some other textures. It could potentially be sort of a wood texture of sorts that you're seeing in the sort of brownish, tannish area. And then the remainder of the building is really simplified with a couple colors of plaster. We're also trying to incorporate some solar shades on the windows specifically. This is a south-facing facade, so we want to make sure we're aware of the sun as how it comes and hits into those units. So we're proposing those on the south-facing windows. It also helps break down the scale of the building and the mass a little bit there. Okay. This next shot actually shows that courtyard, that sort of common, multi-purpose common space, we're calling it, in the apartment side. So again, as Larry mentioned, this can be programmed a number of ways. This could be used for, you know, activities. People can be throwing a football or a frisbee or a bocce ball, or what we've also even looked at is there's potential here to have events in here. It's a large area, so you could potentially have a shaded area there that has a cover on it. You could have, if you wanted, performances in there or other things of that nature. So it's a lot of flexibility, and it really depends how you guys seen that space being used. You can see off in the sort of back end of that back end over here, those are the bridges. They're open air bridges with guardrails on them that connect the buildings. And then what you're looking at over here to the right of the page, that's the main lobby on building 1. So again, you would come into here and the main elevator's there, the security checkpoint is there, and things like that. On the upper floors, those are those sort of active open lounges that I was describing in the plans. This rendering shows the main facade of the dorm building now. Very similar features. Again, we're on both ends of the building. We're showing sort of those glass features. And again, those could potentially really glow nicely at night. Those are those study areas. And then again, the very center of the building, that's the main lobby, that's the main entrance. You would come in there to a two-story lobby, two-story volume. That's where the secured checkpoint is. And again, this is the same materials that we talked about as on the apartment side. Finally, this is our last rendering here. We wanted to show sort of the back area. This is the dorm building again. You can see off in the distance here, that's the sort of the marketplace back there across the highway. This is the apartments over there. And really this starts to show sort of the potential for breakout space outside of the dorm building. So as we mentioned before, you were asking about what that line was coming around. You can see there's quite a bit of grade difference here from this angle. So what we were proposing in this design was a retaining wall that sort of enclosed that outdoor space and that parking area, and then left that sort of riparian area untouched. And that's what we have for you today. Any questions on the architecture, the design?
I was just wondering, in these drawings, I noticed the ground the most, the different colors that you use. Is that part of the plan to use colored concrete or whatever? I see, by the main opening of the apartments, that it's not just regular concrete, it looks like it's a
Right.
darker color. Is that part of the plan, or is that just to make the rendering look great?
So the intent is, I think we're trying to define certain spaces, like especially pedestrian areas
Right,
or
right.
entry courtyards.
So is
with-
that intentional, that
It
those
is.
would be colored?
It is.
Oh, good. That, I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that wasn't just to make it look good, that it
Yes,
was
it
actually
is.
in the plan. That's,
Yeah,
okay.
So
Great,
it's,
thank you.
it's very intentional, but I think as you begin developing this further, you're going to be looking for where that's most impactful for the dollars that you spend.
Right,
So
right.
you'll be balancing those
Okay.
pieces.
Yeah, you'll probably notice right now, we're showing that enhanced paving sort of on the corner at the entry. We're showing them at the main entry areas of both buildings, and probably at some of the crossings as well. So that's where we're defining it right now.
I have a question about the options. So we have option 1 and option 2 for the apartment buildings, and then option 1 and option 2 for the dorm. Are those mix and match, or is it option 1 goes with option 1 and option 2 goes with option 2?
So in both options, the dorm building doesn't change. It's the same for both options. It's really just the apartment side that changes by the removing of that front building that you're seeing right here. And we only provided renderings for the first option, but the dorm building stays exactly the same, and option 2 is basically the elimination of this building 4 over here, and then the remaining 3 buildings sort of slide a little bit closer to the highway.
Closer to the highway.
But we're in option 1, because I thought we had an option 1 and 2 for the dorm building, but that,
No, it's the same option.
No, same option.
same option,
Yeah.
but I thought there was a difference in units.
No.
No.
No? Okay.
Oh, there was in terms of the count.
Okay, so there was a difference in units for option 1 and 2.
You want to go back to that slide, or?
The 4 buildings here are apartments, and so this is option 1. Option 2 takes this building away, and then you're only left with 3 apartments.
Right,
Does
but
that
on
make
the,
sense?
on the
Yeah,
dorm
on the-
building, I don't know if you can just flip back to, I think it was your first or second slide on the, where you had the options here.
Yep.
So it's beds.
Yeah,
It's number of beds.
correct.
So my question remains, is that option 1 and option 1, or is that a kind of a mix and match? Because it may be a feasibility issue if,
Yeah, you lose studio units in option 2.
in the dorms.
Apartment studios.
Okay, but,
So, let me go to the floor plans maybe. So, so there's a dorm studio, which are all in the dorm buildings. So these, we'll get to the rents. The dorm buildings is your lowest cost option for the students. And and they're giving up privacy for that lower cost. One of the more expensive parts of each unit is the kitchens and the bathrooms. So you're amortizing the cost in the dorm building of the kitchens and bathrooms across more people, and thus the cost per person is less. In option 2, the studio units in the apartment building are not in the plan currently. So your mix is 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms.
Yeah, I understand
does
the
it-
option 1 and 2 in the apartments, but I thought in the dorm, and maybe it's a different number of beds, but that there was an option 1 and an option 2.
The number of beds in option 1 and 2 for the dorms is the same. The number of beds for single students and the number of units for family students is less in option 1 and option 2.
Can you go back to the slide that has the numbers? Because I'm still not quite getting it.
Sure.
So where it says 142 units and then 383 beds, that's across all of the buildings?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, so
Okay.
this slide
It's a little misleading.
shows
Yeah.
what I'm asking about.
Yeah.
For the family students, you have plan option 1, 142, plan option 2, 92 units, and then single students, plan option 1, 383, and plan option 2, 321. But are you saying that that's not for the dorms? The dorms stay the same and just the number of overall units change? Is that,
That's correct.
okay,
So it's just the formatting of the slide, I think is, a little- okay.
okay.
So math, didn't need to do math.
Yeah. Some of there's single students in the apartments.
Right.
Okay. Any more questions on the architecture?
Yes, on the dorm building where you have that grade change, so was that the fill or would you just draw a fourth floor? So off to the left on that slide where you have the grade change going down that green area.
Mm-hmm.
I see a pretty high retaining wall, so that's.
Yeah, right now,
Fill for that.
right, so the site right now is higher on this side than it is on this side, and what we're proposing is you start to level this out, so you take it down over here, and you bring that dirt over to this side to start to level that out, but as we balance it, you're still ending up with a need for a retaining wall along this edge, because it really drops off on that corner.
So in the early study, we've tried to balance that grading. There'll obviously be a lot more engineering to make that determination, but that was the intent, yeah.
You want to put another fourth floor on that end or parking under there? Just not the space for
It has crossed our mind. It depends on mix and number of units again.
Any more questions?
Okay, we'll hand it back to Stephen.
So can I ask, are we going to get a hard copy of this? Because I would really love to have it in my hand that I can actually see.
Yeah,
these.
absolutely,
That would really
absolutely. Yeah,
help.
we'd be happy to do that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so staff asked us to present some preliminary average rents just based on the conceptual plans we have and some conceptual cost estimates that we have. So here, this is a large chart, so I'll try to walk you through it. So starting at the top here, this is your single student dorms. You have the dorm building does not change in either option. Those units are all rented on a per bed basis. You have options where only one person is living in the room or 2 people are living on the room. You also have semi-suites where there's a shared bathroom between 2 living spaces. So you have varying pricing based on how many people are living in your room. Do you have a shared bathroom, or is your bathroom down the hall? So the weighted average between those is anywhere from kind of $900 to $1,000 per month. I would like to note as we go through these, all of these rents include fully furnished units and include parking. So that's a gross number that's in here, and they do not include any subsidies that students might be eligible for through from the school or other sources. Moving down, the single student apartments. So these are single students living in the apartments, again, rented on a per bed basis. And that range is anywhere from $1,200 to $1,338. And then next is the family apartments. So these are, again, students who have a spouse, a partner, or dependents. They would be renting these spaces on a per unit basis versus on a per bed basis. And so there's a range of options here. And these are apartments, so you have private kitchen, private bath. And your weighted average is between 2,250 and 2,870. And the difference that you'll see between option 1 and option 2, as you, option 1 has more units, it's a bigger footprint, and you're able to achieve some economies of scale. There's a lot of fixed costs with development, site work, utilities, contractor overhead, inspections, et cetera. And then also, same thing from an operations standpoint. You generally can manage it with this similar amount of folks. You have one property manager, you have leasing staff, et cetera. So under our what we have today in the basic conceptual estimates, and then through our pro forma, the option 1 provides a cheaper rent option. However, it's more units. So we'll get into this in the next slide, just from a comparison standpoint. But is there anything I could address on this chart?
What is the percent number on the in the far right column?
That's the delta between option 1 and option 2.
Is this current rent or projected?
Current rent.
Do you foresee a change on that? Could? Maybe.
Yeah, I actually put this at the bottom. We have a financial model that, has a lot of assumptions. And so, rents are subject to change if the plan changes, cost changes, market conditions. So this is our just preliminary estimate with the information that we have to date and input that we've received from other third parties.
With respect to the unit mix, and just now looking back on seeing the building makeup and whatnot, I'm just trying to remember from the Scion study, and I just recall, I wish I would have looked at it a little more closely before today's meeting. It seemed that there was more of a need for single beds, dorms, kind of the cheaper style, the least expensive type of room. So how do we come, I guess, at this building makeup? I appreciate I think you said it earlier that apartments can provide us some flexibility, but in light of what the Scion study said with respect to providing the least expensive types of rooms in there, I think there was a high intensity of need or want and desire for those types of units. How did we come, I guess, to here?
Yeah, so the basic mix that we have in having more apartments versus dorms has come from feedback that we've received from staff, just in terms of what might be a more desired floor plan based on the demographics at the school. So this was the initial first pass essentially at that. So I
not necessarily consistent, I guess, with the study. I just want to make sure that we paid some money for a good study and want to make sure, I guess, that we're following, I guess, the guidance from that. So I appreciate some deviation based on good comments from staff and input there, but I'd love to see this kind of more in terms of alignment and in terms of the feedback that we got from that study.
Okay. Anything more on rents?
Is that it? Everybody happy with the presentation?
We just have two more slides. We're almost done. So in comparing option 1 and 2 again, both have one dorm building. Option 1 and option 2, option 1 has 4 apartment buildings, option 2 has 3 apartment buildings. Both of these projects are financially feasible based on the preliminary rents we presented you and preliminary cost estimates that we've received. Both option 1 and 2 are within, based on our understanding of the demand capture rates for future single and family students. Again, just kind of recapping, option 1 has a little bit more density and economies of scale, and thus, under our current estimate, would produce slightly lower rents. Option 2 has more, has less units and slightly higher rents. And then just in terms of next steps, happy to answer any additional questions. We'll be happy to provide the hard copy of this presentation for all of you to further analyze these. The goal in moving to the next meeting would be to elicit any further feedback on those options, and or if there are other changes. Again, these plans would not be set in stone. They're still subject to obviously a lot more comment from the board, staff, and community stakeholders. And then we'd also be presenting an estimated pre-development schedule and budget at that time as well.
How many units did we lose by eliminating building number 4?
I think it was 80.
About approximately?
Yeah, we'll get back to you. Yeah, I think it was 80, but we'll get that back to you and confirm.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I'm just wondering, without going completely back to the drawing board, are there options of any kind that would make a significant difference in the per unit cost? Like significant, not like, $10, but like 25%.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
What, can we make it cheaper?
Oh, we are constantly looking for ways to make it cheaper, and our understanding is the goal of the project is to deliver the most affordable rents to the college and to the students while maintaining financial feasibility. So regardless of where we are in that process, that's something that we'd be working hand in hand. It's important to have a contractor on board early, to be at the table with your architect and engineers so that you're coming up with the most efficient design. So there are certainly other ways to reduce costs. You can change the skin, you can change the amount of amenity space. There's a long laundry list of things that can be done, and the best way to do it is really in your building systems, the things that you don't necessarily see. So having the right structural foundation that's very efficient, your mechanical, electrical, and building systems as well being properly coordinated.
If you have any other questions, VP Parker is also here and open for if you may have any questions for him.
What's our timeline moving forward?
Next week, right?
I think next Thursday?
Well, so when you are you referring to timeline for completion of the pre-development phase and construction?
You can take me there, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Well, actually, I think, is better prepared to take you there. But our timeline in terms of making the decision as to which of the options to use and if we are issuing a notice to proceed to the Martin Group, the timeline for that would be at your next meeting next Thursday.
Would it be possible to get a document created that kind of lines up the slide with the rent, where the rents fall with the information that came from the Scion report? Because there's a lot of stuff in the Scion report about like what students said their preferences were, what they could afford. It'd be nice to have those where you could see it all in one piece of paper.
Sure, and I'll ask Catherine if we can work on that. But there is, if you look at the Scion report that was presented to the board back in May, there is one slide in the Scion report that talks about the rents that were tested based on type of unit and bed. And that would be a good comparison with the slide that talks about the rents for option 1 and for option 2.
So we'll have that available. No more questions?
I would say you do all have that presentation in your binders remember the housing binders we gave you? So that would be in there. That would be the May presentation by Scion. But we're happy to
Thank you very
put some
much.
things side
Okay,
side.
thank you.
Thank you, it was wonderful.
Thank you.
Can we make sure to be given this one from tonight?
Oh, it's going to be, yes. And
It'll
it's
be
also
sent?
going to be on online as of Monday or tomorrow. Tonight.
It'll be connected
It's
to the
gonna go
board
online,
doc?
yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Mr. Warden?
Chair Segura, honorable trustees, thank you very much for your thoughtful attention to this. I'd like to follow up on a couple of points. First of all, as a reminder, what the Scion report did say, and Trustee Dodd is correct. You spent $40,000 for that study, and it was an intensive study. They had focus groups, they had schematics, they had various price points. They very thoroughly tested the demand at various prices, and that's, of course, the crux of it. And what they found was that there was a big demand for double occupancy, traditional residence hall beds. And they found that there was a demand and could feasibly be done for 132 beds at $750 per month. Okay? 35% of the 373 beds were at that lowest price point because they said there was a big demand for students. That's that affordability we've been talking about. And this month of January 2020 is the 36th month since you first started talking about this. When I was here, when you started talking about it in January 2017. And from day one, you said affordability was the nub. Now, from a process standpoint, the last time you discussed this, I had requested of and I asked a question as to whether or not Scion was going to be involved in this, of double checking, of giving you advice, giving you another report. And the president answered that, of course, they've been involved all along, which I found was a surprise because I've been making document requests, so I made another document request. And I think on the 9th of December, after your meeting, and I said, I'd like to see all of the billings and the contracts you've had with Scion since August, and how much you've paid Scion for the consulting. And the answer was, at the end of December, oh, there are no records. In other words, Scion has not, up to that point in time, had not been consulted. And they were supposed to be giving you advice. So I find that just a little bit distressing. So, and I really would request you, I think I've advised before, to go and take a look at the proposal made to the Santa Rosa JC in, I believe it was April and then June of 2019. A very thorough proposal, facts and figures, and I would like to know if that type of proposal is going to be presented next week. If it's going to be presented next week, a lot of this information could have been presented tonight. And you really need that information. You spent a lot of money. We know what the demand is. We know what affordability is, number one. And then they come up and say they're going to provide 40 instead of 132. It doesn't compute with what you directed to be done. And I have lots of other questions. I would be taking up too much time, but there are a lot of other things. I will be commenting on it later. One of the problems, of course, is that this wasn't posted online before the meeting.
I'm sorry.
Which
This
it
will
could
be
have been.
posted for the real meeting on Thursday.
Well, yeah, but I could have prepared some further questions and comments if I'd seen some of these proposals before the meeting. And I hope it will be sufficient time before the meeting that we get to see that. But I think there's some fundamental problems you have with looking at this and reviewing this. I think I just addressed them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd kind of like to know if Skyen has looked at this and whether we are actually using their expertise based on all of their studies and their own knowledge of what.
The Cyan Group?
Yeah. If they have looked at that, or if we've been in contact with them, and have they compared it against what they found? Because I think it's absolutely right. We need to have an outside expert be able to say, this is really what we found, and this proposal is really going in the right direction. So I would really like to propose that gets done, honestly.
They, to a degree, they have been consulted, but I'm sure we can get a more concise information on that, or concise report on that. And remember, this presentation will be posted online. If you care to, go over it more closely, we will be taking action on this item on Thursday. And so, we're done. Our regular meeting